Hello, so welcome to another reading vlog this week. It's already Wednesday. We have, I think, just under a week until the end of the month, and I don't really need to, but I kind of want to finish off my October reading plans. However, that would kind of mean I read all of these books, and does that seem realistic for a week? It does not. So we're gonna do the best we can. The first thing is that I have planned for myself to give myself kind of the week next week, which is the end of October and the start of November, like give myself that as a week to catch up on this. So anything I don't get through this week, I will read next week. And as well, I'm going to read this one via audiobook. I have the audiobook, so I will start that this week, but it's quite a long audiobook, I think. Let me check the length. It's 23 hours, so that's okay. I have just, I've got this cat sleeping on my bed. He is not my cat. Oh, that probably didn't focus on him at all. But anyway, he is not my cat, but he's just noticed that the door is closed while I film. And he might decide to be upset about that. We'll see. He seems okay. He seems like he's just gone back to sleep. Anyway, this is the last book in a 7-book epic fantasy series. I really don't know where this book is going to go because I thought the 6th book was a little bit disappointing and it was really the 5th book where everything climaxed. Also, I don't really know what I can talk about with this. Because initially it was people fighting over the thrones with a dark magic element thrown in there. But in a lot of ways that's all wrapped up, although there is still kind of a dark magic religious mystery thing going on. So I guess we'll see once we get back into it. But I am excited that I'll finish that series. As well, what am I going to focus on this week? I think actually I want to read this one. So this is Murder at Mykenai. This is by Catherine Mayo, who is a New Zealand author. My sister gifted this to me. And I believe it is Menelaus and Odysseus when they're younger, like a decade before the Trojan War. And Odysseus tries to help out his friend and it backfires. I don't know what this will be like, to be honest, but I do like a good Greek retelling. I do like a book by a New Zealand author, so we'll read this. It's only 380 pages, only, but the font's quite big and there's decent gaps between the words, so I think I could get through this potentially quite quickly, hopefully, because I would like to pick up some other ones. I do think I'm going to put these two aside for next week because they're both short story anthologies. If I got to them this week, totally I would read them, but I don't think I will. So we'll put these two aside for next week. Then I do also have Skyward Flight by Brandon Sanderson. So this is like a bind up of the short little novellas that him and Jancy Patterson wrote around Cytonic, the 3rd book in the Skyward series, which is a YA sci-fi series where humans have been kind of trapped on this world, and anytime they try to leave, aliens attack them, and then things happen. By the time we get to the 4th book, which has just come out, is just coming out very soon, I think. By the time we get to the 4th book, all sorts of crazy things have happened. There are some elements I really like I really love Doomslug, and I did like Embot, although in the 3rd book I think he was ruined a little bit, or just a little bit silly for me. The 3rd book was very silly for me, but some of the concepts were amazing. So we'll see where the 4th book goes. And I have actually read the first 2 novellas in this because they were set before that 3rd book, but the 3rd novella was set after the 3rd book, before the 4th book. So I'm going to read it now in preparation for the 4th book. And I think even though it's a novella, it's still kind of long. So in this book, it goes from page 373. Are you guys ready to do some maths? Oh, 373 to 579, which if we do approximate maths is about 200 pages, is it? Yes. So maybe I could get through that this week as well. And it is based around younger characters, so it would kind of fit with this, maybe. And they're both books kind of about young people involved in war, so I can link them together that way. Then as well, I have a couple of graphic novels. I think I'm going to put these with the short story anthologies, but if we get to them, then we'll get to them. And that is going to be my reading plans for the week, I think. Okay, so quick reading update because I feel like I haven't really read much since I last talked to you, but also it's already Friday, so I feel like time is doing something sneaky on me. I definitely don't have much more time left in the month, but that said, it's a really rainy day, so I'm going to try and do a bunch more reading this afternoon. But anyway, firstly, let's talk about Murder at Mykenai. I have read the first part. I have found out there's about 5 parts, I think. Part 2 is going to be called Murder, which sounds exciting, which is good because so far it hasn't really been exciting. I am enjoying it. It's well written. It reads very fast, even though not a lot is happening. Really, all that happened in the first part is that Odysseus and Menelaus met each other. They were both kind of disobeying the rules when they first met each other, but then they found a way to meet through more legitimate ways. But there really wasn't much more to it than that. There's no real conflict set up. Other than that, there's a bit of a mystery around Menelaus's mother and what's happened there. But there's no real story yet. But I'm hoping something will happen in the next part that will give it some momentum. I can definitely tell that there is a decent amount of Greek knowledge behind the story. There's little mentions of different things along the way. So I'm liking this story of these men as they're younger, but I don't really know where the story is going yet. The other thing I've been reading is Crown of Stars. I'm only about 2 hours into the audiobook, which I think I said is about a 23-hour audiobook, so really I'm not into it at all. And that's how I feel, because I still don't really know what the point of this book is. Maybe I should read the synopsis. Who would have thought? So reading the synopsis really gives me hope that maybe at the end of this book, all our characters will finally come together and achieve something. Because so far, kind of the big climatic event happened in the 5th book, and now our characters are kind of just recovering from that and trying to get the world back together. But there are a couple of nefarious influences around that are still causing problems. But with this kind of scope of story, I can't really imagine there ever being an ending which is and then they lived happily ever after, because it's a big world. There's no way everyone lives happily ever after, you know? Also, yesterday I accidentally left my AirPods out in the rain, and I was trying to listen to them just before, and they kept glitching. And if that continues, I'm hoping they'll dry out, but if that continues, it's really gonna hinder my ability to read audiobooks, so I guess we'll see. Hello, so I have read 2 more parts of this. It's a little bit of a strange one. In some ways, I feel like it's just these 2 young boys living their life in ancient Greece, but also, in the beginning, there were some weird little mentions of quite graphic, violent things, but they just be mentioned in quite an offhand way. And then some actual traumatic things happened to Menelaus. Actually, I realized the murder that was mentioned in part 2 is mentioned on the back. It says Menelaus, teenage son of the assassinated High King of Greece. So his father gets murdered, and him and Agamemnon need to go on the run. And eventually Menelaus and Odysseus end up together. And at this point, really, Menelaus is just really traumatized by everything that's happened to him, and Odysseus is trying to help him work through it. But Odysseus is Mr. Perfect. Nothing ever goes wrong for him, except his schemes don't always work out for him. But he has a really supportive family, and he's just really good at everything. That kind of Peter Perfect annoying guy. But he's trying to help his friend, and it's kind of, in that way, quite a heartwarming story. But I guess some of the bits where the traumatic stuff was happening was pretty awful. But also, it's quite simply written, so it kind of just goes along. I feel like maybe I'm in the frame of mind where I want to read something really twisty at the moment. This is not really twisty. This is just a story. And it's really interesting from a perspective of ancient Greece tales to get this tale of Menelaus and Odysseus when they're teenagers. But it's not really twisty I feel like I need at the moment. But I'm still kind of having fun with it. Oh, I should also mention my pronunciations of all these Greek names will be wrong, probably. I don't know. I learned a lot of these stories before the internet was really a thing, and so no one was around to correct my pronunciations, and then I've just never been able to replace my mind pronunciations with the actual ones, so I don't care. The other thing I wanted to say, the reason why I particularly like Odysseus actually is because my name is Penny, and I've always really liked the story of Penelope, Odysseus's wife. Odysseus. So I'm kind of hoping we'll get a little bit of Penelope in here, because we did get actually a glimpse of Helen, who eventually ends up being Menelaus's wife and leads to the whole Battle of Troy, all that nonsense. So it's definitely interesting seeing all these characters in a more youthful appearance, and also it's quite casual in times, they'll call each other nicknames rather than say the long complicated Greek name. So it's a lot of fun, and I think if you like Greek mythology, it's probably worth the read. But I've got 40% to go, I think. So it's already Sunday night. who knows? I'll try and finish it today, tomorrow, something. Then as well, I've been reading Crown of Stars. I think I was doing a bunch of housework, so I think I've actually managed to get about 40% of the way through it. And it's a little bit strange because I would still say I don't feel like overall there's a big driving force in the plot. A lot of what's happening is our characters are just like getting information that they couldn't have before. What I do like about these books is that it deals quite well with the fact that in more medieval type times, communication is not the best. It takes a lot of time for messages to get from one place to another, and they did have kind of a means of communicating over long distances, but that isn't really working anymore. And so like it takes time for people to figure out what's going on, and sometimes people have the wrong information, and I like how that all plays out. And I think like a lot of the trauma that the characters are dealing with is explored in a really interesting way. But at the same time, like there are bigger things going on. Like there is this dark, I want to call them dark elves all the time. There's that threat to deal with. It seems like the events of the 5th book have led to something being wrong with the weather, which maybe was clear from before and I just didn't pay attention, but that's become a bit more clear. But also I feel like in a lot of ways we've gone back to things that were happening in the 3rd book. So we've kind of got one character who's trying to prove his legitimacy in terms of his position on the throne, and we've got another character who everyone always kind of thinks is like a demon or has somehow bewitched him, and so she's kind of also trying to prove her legitimacy, although she's also, from the events of the last couple of books, really questioning like, is she a monster because of some of the decisions she's had to make? So maybe in a lot of ways it's that the characters have come back to like similar positions that they were in the 3rd book, but because of everything they've learnt, they're now dealing with it in a different way or looking at it in a different way. Because we also have another character who thought he was the heir to a powerful person, but he probably wasn't. And then he was kind of ousted and went on a big magical adventure, and then now he's kind of back, but he no longer feels like a need to prove his legitimacy, but he still wants the leadership of this area to be really good, so he's trying to help out where he can. So like I don't really feel like any of that is particularly epic. There is some interesting monsters around, some interesting ideas, and I am enjoying it actually. One thing I will say is, you know, I left my earpods out in the rain the other day. I feel like since I did that, they're now louder, and the audiobooks for these books especially, I find them quite quiet, and so now that my earpods are playing louder and I don't have to spend so much time just paying attention to hear it, it's actually more easy to follow along with what's happening because I can put my attention into that. So I'm enjoying spending time with all the characters and seeing them come together and learn about what's going on and learning about all the trauma that each other has been through. But where is it going to go? I still don't really know. Okay, so the weather has now well and truly turned to crap. There's like the tail of an ex-cyclone whizzing past us, or sitting on us, I think. Anyway, as a result, I have managed to finish Murder at Mykenai, and it got really dark. It's kind of weird because it starts out quite lighthearted, just these mischievous boys spending time together, and then I guess I have to give trigger warnings for abuse, gaslighting, rape, suicide, and I probably shouldn't be surprised because this is based on Greek mythology, right, which is dark all the time, but like awful things happen. It does end up kind of being quite heartwarming because it is this friendship that really comes through for Menelaus in his difficult times, but I still ended up being like quite surprised about how dark it got. But I liked the way that it dealt with the themes, even though sometimes I felt like the contrast between the very simple writing style and these like teenage hijinks and the darker elements were a little bit at odds with each other. In some ways I liked though that it was dealt with so matter-of-factly. I did feel though like the very, very ending, it felt a little bit anticlimactic to me, and I don't know if what happened in the plot that didn't quite get there for me was because that's the story she was basing it on, that's what happened, or whether it was like her idea that that's what should happen. But anyway, this was, I want to say, a lot of fun, kind of dark. Definitely a different Greek mythology story than I have read before. So now I'm going to try and pick up and maybe get through today since it's so crappy. Evershore by Brandon Sanderson. What I realised is I got this from the library, this big chonker, so that I could read that last short story. And then I realised I have the ebook. So I'm charging my Kindle at the moment, and I'm just going to read it on my Kindle because I would much prefer to have a light Kindle to read than this big chunker, to be honest. And also, since it's so crap, I'm not going to go outside today, so I might just walk around and read my Kindle a bit to get a bit of activity, a bit of steps going. Hello, so it's a much nicer day today. Yesterday, while it was raining, I did manage to get about halfway through Evershore, and it's quite enjoyable. I find it quite easy to get through, even if in some ways some things are a little bit silly, and it also kind of does that YA thing where it explains the emotions or explains certain things in a lot of depth that just for me seems like overkill, but I know for a younger person they probably do need those explanations. But still, it's an interesting story. Also, I think it is a really good reminder of what was happening in the story so that I'll be ready for Defiant, and just reminding me of all the different characters and all the different alien stuff going on. So Evershore is basically a planet that they have gone to, or a name for a planet. One thing I do like about the series is it has kind of gotten into an exploration of the themes of colonization. So there was one bit where it called out Evershore is like the colonizing aliens name for this planet, and there is one point where the main character is kind of questioning, is that offensive to be calling their planet that then? And there's a few other references to that I quite enjoyed. And just also, this planet that they've gone to is very Earth-like, but the humans in the story don't come from an Earth-like planet. So for them, this Earth-like planet is really strange, and I liked how that was described as well. There is also some exploration of the themes of grief and dealing with things having gone terribly wrong and the trauma of that, which I think, again, is being dealt with quite well. I just think sometimes it's a bit simple, the writing is very simple, and also sometimes it's a little bit silly for me. Just the whole thing. Cytonic, the third book in the series, was also just very silly for me, and I really don't know what to expect with Defiant, but these novellas, I have quite enjoyed them. My favourite part though is still definitely the slugs. We learned a lot about the slugs in the other two novellas, and I just love them. So I guess we'll see how much slugs we get in the second half of this as to whether I love it or not. I am going to try and finish it today. It's currently the last day of October, so I'll try finish it today, but if I don't, I'll finish it tomorrow and just count it as October, because who's going to stop me? Then as well, last night I did actually pick up Blackbird by Sam Humphries and Jen Bartel. I love Jen Bartel's art, so just reading this and seeing all the amazing art throughout it, it's just a really wonderful time. As well, the main character has my dream hair, and so I spent the whole time just enjoying her hair and thinking, how do I get that hair? And it's kind of a bit of a distraction, to be honest, from the story. And because I love the art so much, and because I love her hair so much, honestly, I don't feel like this could have done anything wrong. I did see the Goodreads average rating for it is not very high, and I saw some criticisms of the storytelling, but honestly, I didn't think it was that bad. I thought the story and the world that it's setting up is really interesting, but the downside is that this is not finished, and as far as I can tell, there will be no more of the story. The story kind of just sets up this magical world, and we have this young girl who's trying to be a part of it and learning about her connection to this magical world based on something that happened to her when she was younger, and learning all that I thought was really interesting, and the world that is set up was really interesting, and the way the magic works is you have these different gems that let you have different spells, and you put them into a bracelet on your wrist, and there was a lot of potential to explore that as well that we didn't get to, and just so many characters that obviously were beautifully drawn, but also seemed really interesting characters, and basically it was all just set up. There's a few surprising reveals along the way, which I enjoyed, but then it just ends, and in a lot of ways the story just feels like a beginning. Look how cool she is. Actually, in the extras at the back, there was some alternate covers, and so many of the artists included in that were artists that I really love, Sana Takeda and also Loish. And there were some other cool ones as well, which maybe I should look up those artists because they were cool. Oh, Fiona Staples. So I had a really fun time with this, but I don't know, I just loved her hair. That's my main conclusion. Then we have Crown of Stars. I went for a run this morning and I think I'm now up to about halfway. I'm trying to run the maths in my head. I'm not sure it all makes sense, but I think I'm about halfway through. And like, I am still enjoying this, but I also don't know how it's possibly going to end in another half a book. I just feel like so many things from earlier in the series have come back, and it's kind of an interesting commentary on the idea that this massive magical cataclysm type thing happened, and instead of that like triggering people to change their behavior, people have just come full circle and ended up back where they were beforehand. So that's interesting, but also like we've spent so many books trying to deal with all these problems and we haven't really gotten anywhere. But in the last kind of section I was reading, there are a few little magical things going on which I have enjoyed. So I'm having fun with it, but I've still got quite a lot more to go. Then I guess that's all. Okay, so we're back to terrible weather and it is raining a lot outside, so I don't know, maybe this audio will be ruined, but we are going to try it anyway, because I do want to wrap up this vlog now that the end of October is gone. So how did I do at reading all these things? Firstly, Murder at Mykenai. I did want to mention this because I know I already said I finished it, but I finally got around to sorting out my Goodreads and I discovered that there is another book, like a sequel to this. I don't think like it's a you have to read it sequel, because this did feel final in its conclusion, but it's like another story, and it seems like in this one maybe Odysseus is going to be the one who's struggling and maybe Menelaus will be helping him out instead. Also, it mentions something about a woman or a girl and some kind of love thing. So Penelope, maybe Penelope. That would be nice. So I might actually try and pick it up, even though I have been trying not to start new series, but this doesn't say it's a series on it anywhere. I suspect that when this was published, the plan wasn't to make it a series, but then this one went okay, so she decided to write another one in the same world. That's my theory. So I guess at some point I'll pick that up. I don't know when. The other thing that I've been reading is Evershore, and I have finished that off. I have to say, like, the second half, I felt like there were a lot more battle scenes than the first half, and battle scenes are not my favorite. Even if these aren't too badly written for battle scenes, like, battle scenes can definitely be worse than these ones. But still, like, I do get a little bit bored with them, and it's more like learning about the different worlds, and there was also some cool stuff done with the cytonic powers, so those are the two bits that I found the most interesting in this world, is learning about the bigger cytoverse and learning about the cytonic powers. I do think, like, mostly, I tend to consider novellas in series as like optional reads for the fans, but I really think there's so much information in the novellas for this series that I don't really know how you would go if you skip these novellas. So like, if you've been skipping them, maybe don't, although I guess once I've read Defiant I'll have a better idea whether that's true, but I assume a lot of the stuff that's being set up in these novellas is going to be important for the final book. Like, why else would it happen? Also, actually, so right at the end, something happened and it was so unrealistic. Basically, someone ends up being put in a certain position and you can't tell me that there wasn't a better person to do that. Like, really? It was just like kind of a good message near the end, but cheesy and unrealistic. So that's a bit disappointing. But I think I like these novellas more than I would have expected, given how frustrated I was with the direction and the silliness of the third book, Cytonic, and even the second book started going in that direction. And I just don't know, is the fourth and final book gonna like bring things back to the feeling of the first book and like have a really good emotional conclusion, or is it gonna continue to be like silly? I don't know. I also don't know when my library is finally going to get me that book to read, but we will wait and try and be patient. The only other thing I think that I was reading this week was Crown of Stars. I will finish that off in my next reading vlog. Oh, and Blackbird. I read Blackbird and I am still dreaming of having this here. Like, not just the colour. Obviously, I would need to go lighter to be this colour, but also, like, just why can't I have beautiful hair? My hair's not bad, but like, I want to be her. Anyway, that was my week of reading. Do let me know if you've read any of these books and what your thoughts were about them, because I would love to talk with you about them down in the comments, or let me know what else you've been reading that's been exciting lately. And of course, do subscribe if you'd like to see more of my bookish videos. Otherwise, thank you so much for watching. I hope that you are doing well, and I will see you next time.